All right, fantastic. So yeah, so in this conversation, we're going to talk about achieving brand clarity. So I've been really excited about this and all the value that is gonna be packed with, and I hope you all find value in it as well. And I hope you find it really helpful. So achieving brand clarity. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about the importance of having a clear vision. We're going to talk about gaining more clarity on your brand. We're going to talk about how clarity can give you a huge advantage over others. We're going to talk about the importance of clarifying our processes and more. So let's dive in. So first we need to understand, why is it so important to have brand clarity? Why is it so crucial to have a crystal clear brand? So studies have shown that our brains naturally prefer things that are clearer and easier to understand. So think about your customers' everyday lives. So most people, they have their families, they have their jobs, they have their businesses, and they have a lot of complexity going on in their lives. So if you have a brand that's not clear or easy to understand, then you're just going to add to that complexity. And also, if you have a brand that's clear, then you're naturally going to attract more people to you compared to other brands. They might not be so clear. So our brains naturally prefer things that are clear and easy to understand. And this has also been proven as well. Secondly, if your brand is not clear, then what happens is that people, they would tend to have false assumptions and false conclusions about your brand. So a lot of people, they develop these worldviews and biases, maybe based on what they saw online or what they saw on the television or what somebody else said. So all these things would shape how they perceive your brand. So if you're not clear up front about what you're all about, then what happens is that people, they end up having these false conclusions about what you're all about. So by having a clear brand up front, you could really shape the perception that people have. And thirdly, we do know that clarity is a key differentiator. So think about the hundreds, if not thousands, of competitors who are out there that might be selling something similar. So just by having a crystal clear brand with a clear message, you can compete with other brands that are even 10 times larger than yours. Because a lot of the other people in your industry, they might not be very clear. They may not have a clear website. They may not have a clear message. So just by being clear about what you're all about and what you stand for and the value you provide, and by having a really clear message, you can really cut through the noise and stand out from all the others through clarity. So let's talk about the importance of having a clear vision for the future. So we all live in a world that's changing really rapidly. We live in a world that's changing really fast. So that's why it's really crucial to have a clear vision. So my question to you is, how's your industry changing and how's the world changing? So changes can be in terms of technological changes. It might also be economical changes. So there's so many different types of changes that may occur. And we may not be fortune tellers, but it's still crucial to at least have a basic idea of how things are changing. So one example of a brand that wasn't paying attention to how things were changing was Kodak. So you might be familiar with Kodak, but the reason why Kodak failed, the reason why they went out of business was because they completely ignored the shift to digital cameras. So they were still selling the traditional cameras while everyone else was shifting to digital cameras. So this really made it hard for them to compete because they weren't really paying attention to how things were changing. Another example was Sears. You probably, if you're not familiar with Kodak, then you might be familiar with Sears. But Sears was one of the brands that was hardest hit by the shift to online shopping and brands like Amazon. So yeah, so when you're able to really pay attention to how your industry is changing, it's much easier to come up with ways to really prepare yourself for the future. So yeah. So it's all about being able to adapt to change. So how can your brand really adapt to these changes? And also, like, what impact do you want your brand to make? So if they were looking back at your brand in the future, like, what would you like your brand to be known for? What kind of reputation are you trying to build? Do you have a clear mission or a vision for the future? And also, when you look at your industry and the world, right, you might think about, like, what's your industry lacking? What do you feel like the world is lacking that your brand can provide? What do you feel like your industry is lacking that people may need? So when you're able to really, like, take some time and really think about these questions, it's much easier to gain more clarity, right, on your future vision and the impact that you're trying to make in the world. So let's talk about clarifying our objectives. So branding is a really strategic thing. It's very strategic. So it's all about goals and how we get there. It's all about objectives and how we get there. So there are different types of objectives. There are short-term and there are also long-term. So ideally, you would have maybe an ultimate goal that you're trying to get to, and you can also have micro goals. So micro goals are the small steps that you can take to help you to get to your ultimate goal. So when you're able to really identify, like, what are those micro steps that I need to take to help me to get to where I need to be, when you're able to gain more clarity on what they are, it's much easier to really clarify your objectives. And also, by clarifying your objectives, you could really align your team and your stakeholders around that objective. And that helps really improve performance and also drive focus inside your business. And also, when you're able to really clarify your objectives, you could really identify, like, what are my priorities? What are my priorities? So when you're clear about what your objectives are, you could really understand, like, what's more important than the other. What can I prioritize to help me to get to my objective more efficiently? And also, what's the timeline? So nothing great was ever accomplished overnight. It takes lots of time, lots of effort, lots of dedication. So it doesn't have to be an overnight success, right? It could be maybe by this time next year. It could be in the next 5 years, or it can be in the next 10 years. So what do you think the timeline would be to help you to get to your goal? And what do you feel like it's stopping you from getting there as well? And fourthly, like, how do you measure success? So a lot of people, they measure success in terms of having lots of money, but success doesn't only have to be monetary. There are many other ways that you can measure success. One way that you can measure success could be, maybe it's the number of people that you have impacted. How many lives do you want to have impacted in the next 5 years or the next 10 years? And also, if you're a B2B, then how many businesses do you want to transform in the next 5 to 10 years? So these are all ways that you can measure success. Another way to measure success could be, like, the emotional impact that you're trying to make. So your emotional impact can be measured in terms of your NPS. That stands for Net Promoter Score. That's how likely are people to refer you to others. There's also the NEV, your net emotional value. So that's how positively people feel about your brand. So all these things can be measured using metrics. Success could also be measured in terms of, just having, like, a large engaged audience. So it's not enough to just have a large social media following. It's much more effective to have people who are actually active. Maybe they're attending your events, things like that. So all these things are a way that you can really measure, like, the impact that you're having and, like, how happy people are about what you're doing. Another thing about objectives is that your customers, they could also have objectives as well, especially if you're a B2B business. So what do you think are the objectives of your clients, your ideal prospects? What do you think their objectives are? And when you're able to really gain more clarity on what their objectives are, you could really connect with them at a higher level, because you're going to be on the same page and they feel like you have a better understanding of where they're trying to get to, and you can really align your offer and your message with their objectives. So yeah, so next we're going to talk about having a clear target audience. So to some people, this might sound cliche. Some people, they might have heard this before, but there's still a lot of people who they don't really have a clear target audience, and they still don't really understand what it means. So having a clear target audience is not just about discriminating against other people. It's not about alienating people or only focusing on one person. It's not about leaving out your other customers. So having a clear target audience, it's more about just empathy. So if you've been in business for a while, for example, just take a moment and think about it, like from your past experience, what patterns do you see? So when you look at your past customers, like what do they tend to have in common? What do they tend to have in common? And when you're able to identify what they have in common, you can really narrow it down to like what your target audience is like. So my question to you is, what problem does your brand solve for your customers? What are the key problems that you're able to solve for them? So problems can be in terms of, it could be financial problems, it could be emotional problems, it could be psychological problems, it could be physical problems. So when you're able to hone in on what these problems are and really convey that a sense of empathy, that really tells them that you understand them better than anybody else. And also, like, what fears are they trying to avoid? What are some of their fears? So a lot of times fear could be a huge factor that stops people from wanting to do business with you or take on your offer. So maybe they've been burnt in the past. Maybe they've had some bad experiences. So when you're able to really identify like what their fears are, then in that case, then you could really address those fears up front so that they have a sense of reassurance for what you offer, and then they perceive you as different and more trustworthy. And also, like, what questions or concerns might they have? What questions and concerns might they have? So a lot of times, like, for example, if you have a website, the reason why people may not be taking on your offer might be because they have certain questions and concerns. Even in your own personal life, have you ever gone to a store and no one was there to even answer any questions, so you just left? So that's the same with your customers. So if no one is really addressing their deeper questions and concerns, a lot of times you're not going to work too hard. They're just going to leave and go to someone else who's much clearer. So when you're able to really identify and address their concerns up front, that could really help to amplify your message. And also, like, what false assumptions or misconceptions might they have? So like I said earlier, a lot of times people, they develop these false ideas based on their past experiences. So when you're able to identify what they are, that would also really help to equip you to really improve your messaging, your brand, and how you really communicate with them. All right, so that leads us to the next thing, which is, so let's talk about having a clear message. So it all boils down to the message. So it's not just the message, it's also how the message is being expressed. So the message, that's what really connects you with your customers, with your audience, is the message. So the first step is to break the curse of knowledge. So to those people who don't know what the curse of knowledge is, the curse of knowledge refers to the idea that a lot of times in our industry, we tend to use words that people don't understand. We tend to use concepts and different word phrases that people don't understand. So by breaking the curse of knowledge, we can really simplify our message, because to you, it may seem very easy, but to people who are outside of your industry, it's kind of like you're speaking a different language. So anytime I come across marketing copy or a website or collateral, I always ask, like, how can we really simplify this message? How can we simplify it to make it much clearer and much more easy for people to understand? Because like I said earlier, a lot of people, they have really complex lives. So if you come through with your complex messaging, you're just going to add to that complexity. So it's always crucial to think about how can we really break down our message so that it's crystal clear and crystallized. And thirdly, it's always crucial to provide proof. So even in your own personal lives, there may have been times when you came across an offer, but the reason why you didn't buy that offer or take on that offer was because you just didn't believe that it was true. So my question to you is, what are you currently doing to really prove your claims so that people believe in what you have to offer? So proof can be in the form of, it could be in the form of endorsements from people in your industry. It could be in the form of testimonials. You can provide videos. All these things would make your messaging more impactful. And also, another thing to understand is that people process information in different ways. So people think in different ways. So some people are more visual. So they prefer designs and they prefer videos and they like color, while some people are more kinesthetic. So they want to be more interactive. They want to be able to participate. While some people, they just like to read a lot and they just want to hear things. So they're more auditorial. So one way for you to really amplify and clarify your message is by speaking to the people who learn in different ways. So not just reading, but also visual and also making it more interactive. So these are all ways that you can really clarify your message and make it more impactful. So lastly, we're going to talk about processes. So it's all about processes. So branding is it's both an art and a science. It's both an art and a science. So it's a science because it's all about trying different things and then sticking to what works best. And if it doesn't work, we would ask, why is it not working? And if it does work, we would ask, why is it working? So my question to you is, what steps do you currently take to acquire new customers? What steps are you currently taking? Do you have some kind of steps that are working? And have you tried other processes to acquire new customers? So once you really uncover a process that works, then it's just a matter of rinse and repeat because you've found something that works and that's repeatable and teachable. And also, like, what steps do your customers need to take? So even from my own personal experience, there have been lots of times when the reason why customers weren't taking action was because the steps were too complex, the steps were too overwhelming. So how can you really clarify and simplify the steps that your customers had to take? So your steps can be complex, but the steps that your customers take always needs to be as simplified as possible. So how can we break it down so that it's as easy as ABC? How can we really eliminate unnecessary steps? So for example, if you're filling a form on your website, are you asking questions that you don't really need? Are you asking unnecessary questions? All these things would prevent people from filling that form because it's not clear why you're asking that. And they probably don't even have that information. So my question is like, are they simple and are they clearly understood? So to you, it might seem simple, but to people who are outside of your industry, they may actually have a hard time understanding the whole process. And also, like most people are very busy. So just by simplifying the process, you could really streamline your whole sales process and make things more efficient. So processes can also be internal. It could be the process that your team makes to deliver on a service or on a promise. So how can we really clarify and simplify our processes so that things become, much more efficient and much more impactful? So yeah, so my question to you is, Do you have a crystal clear brand based on what we've talked about? Do you feel like you have a crystal clear brand? So here are the key takeaways from this conversation. By having a clear vision, we can be better equipped to shape our futures. By setting clear objectives, we can really maintain our focus. By having a clear target audience, we can refine our messages and determine like what is the best way that we can reach them. If we simplify our message, then people will listen. And by clarifying our processes, we could achieve bigger results. So yeah, let's dive into the Q&A. Let me see. So who would like to go first? Feel free to put your hand up if you have any questions, and then we can take it from there. Who's there? All right. So I see Dr. Nola. Is your hand up?
My hand is up, and it's not so much a question, but a comment. You're absolutely on target when you talk about clarifying brands. I often talk to members of of our community in one-on-one to give them advice, and they don't have a clear message regarding what they do. They do a little bit of everything. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to pull it together to determine what it is they really do. So I think that was very, very good and right on point.
Sure, absolutely. All right. So how about Linnea Jones?
Okay, my question is, when you say brand, what do you mean? Define brand.
Okay. So yeah, so the brand, it exists in your customers' minds. So your brand just refers to how they feel about you, how they experience, and what they associate with your brand, with your company or your organization. So it's all about perceptions, experiences, and associations. So it's a very intangible thing that fits in people's minds. So branding is what you do to influence that. So by having a clear message and a clear process and a clear vision that's authentically expressed, you could really amplify the impact of your brand and like how people perceive, and how people perceive and experience your company or your organization. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
I'm sorry. May I add something to what you just said that
yeah,
gives an example? So we provide training and consulting, and one of the certifying bodies in California, we have 3 of them, and we are credentialed with all 3. One of the certifying bodies contacted me and said, anytime we think about training, specifically in this particular area, we see your face. Mm-hmm. And so part of branding is so that people would, when they think about training or a specific training, they immediately think V-Solutions Consulting.
Absolutely. So that boils down to associations. So like what they associate with your brand. So like when they hear certain words, your brand is the first that comes to mind. Okay. Fantastic. That's a great point. So yeah. So who would like to go next? I see Keith Crow.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello. Okay, great. Yeah, so I am a network marketer, and I find myself now in the great position of being connected with some movers and shakers in different arenas, right? One being life insurance, the other being research and development taxes and estate planning, and then also legal services with Legal Shield. And I struggle with covering all of those under one umbrella and then presenting that to, my customers, because right now I engage people, on one level or another level or another level. And then we get to talk about, okay, well, now that you're here, have you considered this or considered that? But as far as just a brand, I don't see it being consolidated. So the name of my LLC is Shake On It, which came to me as integrity in business when back in the days when people used to shake hands and their word was their bond. Well, I know there's not a lot of that now, but that's what I like to present. So, quality customer service. However, with the branding, yeah, it gets a little skewed. So you have a recommendation on how to do that? And I'll say this, I also work for, in corporate, and the company that I work for has different products and has partnered with different other vendors, and they seem to do it well. If you go to the website, then they've just got these different levels. Okay, we do this if you need that, we do this if you need that. It's all centered around, digital video, but, and I see it as far as the format, but I don't see it as far as the relationship in the three entities that I am involved in. So hopefully I haven't complicated it, but yeah, I'm looking for some, cohesiveness that I can utilize when I'm doing the branding, as far as like websites and things of that nature.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So just to be clear, so you said you had like 4 different businesses?
Actually 3.
Okay.
I got 3 businesses and a job, man.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, so a lot of times branding is more about focus, like finding that clear focus. So, I would admit that if you have 3 businesses, it's gonna be much more difficult to really to really clarify your brand, not to discourage you or anything, but it's definitely going to be much more difficult to really clarify your brand and what especially as a network marketer. From my experience, like most network marketers that I've seen, they don't really have much control over like what their website looks or things like that, because the company controls all of that.
Right. So in that regard, just, I could just have a link to the company. I don't see that as an issue. But go ahead, keep talking. Yeah, I'm here to listen more so than to speak. So
yeah, sure. So like one way to approach it is to focus on, like, out of all your businesses, where do you see like the most opportunity? Which one of them do you feel like is most lucrative? And then you can then like hone in on that one and amplify that one a little bit more. And then you could then have the other ones as like side, things that you do on the side as well. You know what I mean? That could be one way to approach.
Yeah. Right. But the cultural climate right now definitely is pushing me toward the legal services, with the way that people are being taken advantage of. And, just the climate in society, that's the one. And my heart is pushing me in that direction. The more lucrative one is the businesses and the taxes, research and development, things of that nature. But, I'm not hurting for money in that regard. I mean, there's bread on my table, praise God. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm struggling with that, but my heart is definitely got me in the legal services area because I see a greater need for that right now, for those that are being, disadvantaged and disenfranchised.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, a lot of these things are debatable. Like me personally, what I do is I focus on where passion and income intersect. So like, what I'm passionate about, that's also making some money as well. Right. So I don't know what your situation is, but if you're passionate about the legal thing and it's also, getting some decent income, then I would say that you can probably focus on it a little bit more and see how you can amplify, the impact that you're making. And then you can also have the other things as a side thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, thank you. That you provided some clarity for me. I've just got to execute it. But yeah, I think I will put the legal thing, put more weight on the legal thing, but then, sort of schedule doing some of the other things because they're also beneficial to my community. However, one definitely has precedence over the other two. So, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate you.
All right, then. Great. So yeah, who would like to go next?
My name is Marilyn, and I have a question for that last gentleman. Is he an attorney? Because I'm an attorney, and he mentioned legal services. I just was wondering, is he an attorney?
No, ma'am. I am not an attorney. However, the services that we provide give access to law firms all over the United States, and even in certain provinces in Canada.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I use the services. We actually use Freeman, Fromme and Thrush out of Richmond, and it was a time I had an issue in New York, and I went to Freeman, Fromme and Thrush. They referred me to the New York attorney, and we got the issue resolved, and it didn't cost me anything other than what I was already spending. So, you know,
Okay.
I know that it works. Yeah. So that's from that. So no, I'm not an attorney. I do not give legal advice. Believe me, that is my disclaimer. I can share experiences. I cannot give legal advice.
All right. Thank you for answering that. I don't want to take up any more of this gentleman's time. Thank you.
That's all. You're welcome.
Great, great. So who would like to go next? Let me see. Who would like to go next? I see Keith Crow.
Oh, my
Wait, you
hand
just
still-
went,
I'll
right?
take it down. I'll
Okay,
take it down.
okay. Who would like to go next? Let's see. Let me see. Oh, wow. So if no one wants to go next, it means that I've done a really great job and no one has any questions.
You did do a great job.
Yeah. It could also be a comment. It doesn't have to be a question, but you may have a comment or something you want to add. Let me see. Or maybe everyone is just really shy.
Yeah, I think sometimes, Eddie, that people don't have the right questions. They can't formulate that in their mind to ask you at the moment. Maybe as they get off and think about it, those questions come to mind. A lot of questions in Brandon, and I think the first late Sanaya asked a really good question: is what is branding? And if people can get that, and how does it look for their organization? I think, and Sanaya, she has her hand up again, so she might have another good question.
Okay, go ahead, Sanaya.
So I'm not an attorney. I live and work in the state of South Carolina, but my competition is attorneys and judges, retired judges who are mediating in the state. So I'm trying to build my brand as a less expensive form of mediation for the perhaps blue collar worker. And I'm trying to build my brand by mediating in the afternoons and on the weekends, which most attorneys and judges do not do. So that is how I'm trying to build my brand. I'm looking at what the competition is doing, and I'm trying to do the opposite of what the competition is doing. I'm not sure that I'm being successful at building that, but that's why I wanted to attend today's session.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So that's a pretty common approach. So it all depends on, so we call that positioning, right? It's how, where are you relative to everyone else? So the way customers think is they want to know, like, where does your brand fit relative to all the other options that they have? So just by positioning yourself as an option that they can get at a lower cost, that would also really help to really clarify, how you're positioned and like how you're differentiated from all the others.
Marilyn raised her hand.
Yes, I have a question to that last lady. Now, I am an attorney, right? But I'm not licensed in South Carolina. I have family there. And my question to you is, have you done your homework to make sure that they haven't said in order for you to do mediation in the state, you have to be an attorney?
Well, in the state of South Carolina, I cannot be certified as an attorney. However, the mediation rules, if a person is a mediator, they know the rules. The mediation rule 19 says that whenever I mediate, I have to notify clients that I am not certified. I can't be certified as a mediator. And of course, however, that does not negate my experience and my expertise from mediation, because I probably perhaps have more mediation because I got my master's in mediation. And so that's what sparked my interest in the mediation field from my education.
Yeah.
And so sort of try to build my brand around being a less form of cost for clients. And of course, I always encourage people whenever I'm called, because people call me from looking at my website. And I always encourage people, if you're more than welcome, I encourage them to call attorneys. And then a lot of times people will circle back to me. They will start with me and then they'll circle around and then they'll call attorneys and call judges and then they come back to me.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, some people, right, they position their brand as like the more affordable option. So I wouldn't say lower cost, because if you say lower cost, it might be seen as like a lesser quality. So I would say affordable, more affordable, or more flexible, right? And that would really help to really improve the messaging. And also, like, I don't know how your business is set up, but like even some people, they offer like a tier-based pricing system. So maybe they have more premium options, and then they have lower cost options, and then they have medium priced options, right? So these are all different directions that you may want to consider, because, you might come across people who are interested and can afford, the premium option as well. Yeah. Great. So
Atia
yeah.
has her hand up.
All right, Atia.
Good afternoon. First, thank you for even hosting this event. It's always a pleasure to come and get information and learn something new. And so one of my questions is, because I am in financial services, it is really difficult. And maybe I'm making it more difficult than it really is. But because there are so many different elements, like financial services is so broad, what steps do I need to take to narrow down what actually needs to be like the brand, right? There are a number of problems that we solve. Do you think it is a good idea to maybe focus on one problem, maybe several problems? What would you say would be like the action steps that I need to take to narrow down and really figure out what that means as far as creating a brand?
Okay, sure. So the first question that I would ask you is, what's your capacity? So are you like the only person that's doing all the work, or do you have like maybe other people that you're working with, or are you the only person?
Well, I'm not the only person, no.
Okay. So like roughly how large is your business, roughly?
I would probably say at this point now it's about 11 of us.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah. So one way that you could approach it is that you could have like different people with different areas of focus. Depending on, how things are set up, they could all have like different areas of focus. So for example, even in my business, like my area of focus is on branding, but I also have like maybe like videographers that I work with as well that just focus on that. So that's one way you could approach it. I would also ask you, like, how good are you at solving these problems? Because a lot of times it's hard for people to believe that, like, one company can solve all these different problems. So like they might perceive you as like a jack of all trades that's a master of none. So yeah. So one way to combat this is by focusing on like what do you do better than everybody else, and where are you seeing the most opportunity. So
okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So a lot of these things in branding are debatable. So it's just a matter of like, because I don't really know like your unique situation, but sometimes, when you can really look at your situation and what you're comfortable with, it might be a good idea to just focus on what the things you like, the top 3 things that you do better than everybody else. Or you can have like different members of your company with different areas of focus that they can be known for. Yeah. So yeah. And who would like to go next? Oh, you have another question?
Well, I don't have I do have a question. So my company name is Trademark. What do you think about trademark regarding branding, and at what point, if at any point, should people get their brand trademark, their company name, for example?
Okay. So yeah, so trademarking, like it's best suited for companies that are maybe growing really fast. Like if you feel like you're blowing up really fast,
Yeah.
you should definitely get your name or your logo trademarked because even from my experience, I've heard horror stories of people getting sued. So like it will be really crucial. I would say like when you're just about to start blowing up, it will be a good idea to probably get your name or your logo trademark just to make sure that it's not already taken by someone else. Because the bigger as you start to get bigger, like
Mhm.
you would start to attract like these awkward situations, right? So trademarking is the best way to avoid that. But if you're a small business and you're not really getting that much exposure, then I feel like you don't really need to trademark at the early stage. Yeah.
That's really good. At that point is when we trademark, when we saw another business coming out with something similar, they weren't legitimate and they had a name very similar. And as we grow and get more exposure, not just in this state, but in other states and contracts, I decided it's time to trademark. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let me see. All right, so who would like to go next?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for what has been given thus far. But I just had a quick question. I put it in the comment, actually, just trying to get a clarity on this branding thing because my understanding, I was told that branding is like a promise. But to me, I'm just trying to use this analogy. If I'm trying to feel my customer that their experience with me was, one of excellence, one of reliability, one, those good high end things, kind of like when we think of Apple, that even their box, their carton is a product of quality. So is it safe to say that a branding can be like a seal? I want them to remember me. So when I do the customer service, everything that's good, I want them to walk away with it and tell somebody else about it. Is that okay to look at it that way?
Yeah, like so a lot of these different definitions of branding, they're all saying the same thing, but they're all phrasing it in different ways. But like another way to phrase it is that you're trying we need people to foster a conclusion ultimately. So give me an example of a brand that you like.
Oh, well, like I said, Apple
Okay.
just
So yeah, so like Apple, for example, right? When people come across Apple, right, they have this fostered conclusion in their mind before they have even used, their offer. They have this conclusion that they developed because of the power of, the brand and what they associate with Apple, and also like how Apple makes them feel about themselves. So ideally, right, a brand should have what we call a self-expressive benefit. So in which like people who use that offer or people who use those services are probably perceived as maybe smarter or more beautiful or things like that. So it could also give people a self-esteem, and that could be a really powerful thing that I spoke about in my other presentation about emotional branding. Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, it also depends on like the kind of business you have, right? So like a nonprofit versus like a large tech company versus like a small mom and pop, how they will approach it will be very different, right? Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, because a lot of people they like to compare themselves with like Apple, but like those companies are like much larger than yourself, and they've been here much longer. They came from like a different era. So a lot of the things that they may have done to be successful may not really apply in today's game. So yeah. But yeah, ultimately speaking, right, it's all about the conclusion that you're fostering so that, as soon as they come across your marketing or the way your communications, they have this conclusion, right, about what you're all about. Yeah. And this perception. So yeah.
Great. Thank you again.
All right. So who would like to go next? All right. So yeah, I would also like to add to what like Dr. Nola asked earlier about getting trademarked. I would also add that like if you have a product, that you should also make sure that you have a patent for it. Because if your product ends up being successful, it's guaranteed to get copied by other people, and you wouldn't want that to happen. So if your product starts picking up, that's also a good time to make sure you have a patent for it, especially if it's something very new and proprietary. So yeah. All right. All right. All right. So yeah, who would like to go next? Anybody else? Any comments? Any questions? Let me see. What time is it? 3:58. Okay.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, who would like to
This
go
is
next?
this is Marilyn. I just wanted to piggyback off of what you said about patents and trademarks. I like to do a lot of research, and I want everyone to know that the Patent and Trademark Office, they do free workshops online for the public. They give wonderful workshops, a lot of detailed information
Mhm.
from it's
and
online. It's
yeah.
the PT and O office. You can look it up. So I just wanted to follow up with that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
they have videos there as well.
Okay.
We have
That's
a lot of videos to help you.
yeah. And also, I just need to clarify that like it's different from just a domain name. So don't just think that you can just search for your domain name and then just because no one else is using that domain, that nobody else is, using the same name that you're using. So it's, it's important to like really go more in depth and really maybe consult with an attorney and see if, your name or your concepts, have already been taken. Yeah. All right. So yeah. So now we're about 4 o'clock. So yeah, if no one has any other questions, I would advise to just take some time and just really think about all the points that we went over, and feel free to visit the blog to learn more about branding, and feel free to reach out to me in the future if you have any questions. So
And I
yeah,
just want to thank everyone
all right,
for coming
great.
and for joining our group. How many of you, do you mind, Eddie, taking down your PowerPoint? That way it'll be easy for me to see everyone.
Okay.
And I just want to thank everyone for joining the Black-owned business and for coming to Eddie's presentation, which is invaluable. And so if you have further questions, I would definitely connect with Eddie and follow up with him. But I want to encourage you guys to come to some of our events. We have events all the time. Eddie's one of our leaders on the Black-owned business. I thank you for joining our group, our community. How many of you are brand new to the Black-owned business community? Great. Marilyn, welcome to our community. Fred, welcome to our community. We have a number of events going on all the time, and we have great leaders like Eddie. Eddie's one of our leaders. If you have any question, not just about branding, please reach out to us.